right, welcome to the session today. My name is Brian McKendree. We're going to be discussing OSHA's revised hazard communication standards and how that affects you and your company. Just a little bit about construction safety experts. We are a full-service safety organization. We provide crane operator training, crane inspections, program development with written manuals, OSHA and MSHA training, including scaffold awareness and competent person training, just to mention a few items about us. Moving right into the hazard communication standard changes, OSHA, our Occupational Safety and Health Administration, hazard communication are bringing the United States into alignment with the global harmonization system of classifications and labeling of chemicals, or commonly known as GHS. Some of the things to be aware of: the standard with GHS is expected to prevent injuries and illnesses, save lives, and improve trade conditions for chemical manufacturers. The original standard back in 1983 gave workers the right to know. The new globally harmonized system gives workers the right to understand. Standard still requires chemical manufacturers and importers to evaluate the chemicals they produce or import and provide hazard information to employers and workers by putting labels on containers and preparing safety data sheets. Now, the old standard allowed chemical manufacturers and importers to convey hazard information on labels and material safety data sheets in whatever format they choose. And if you've ever reviewed MSDSs or material safety data sheets from varying manufacturers, you will see that the standard is not equal across the board. A modified standard provides a single set of harmonized criteria for classifying chemicals according to their health and physical hazards, and specific hazard communication elements for labeling and safety data sheets. Other major changes: hazard classification. Chemical manufacturers and importers are required to determine the hazards of the chemicals they produce or import. Hazard classification under the new law updated standard provides specific criteria to address health and physical hazards, as well as classification of chemical mixtures. Labels, talking about labels, chemical manufacturers and importers must provide a label that includes a signal word, pictogram, hazard statement, and precautionary statement for each hazard class and category. And we'll discuss in little detail about labels a little later on, because that is a major change to the standard, and that there's a lot of differences as what you will see on labels going forward. Safety data sheets also is kind of new, just kind of a change of the name there, leaving off material but including safety data sheets. It's a new format, 16 specific sections, ensuring consistency in presentation of important protection information. All right, what do you need to do? As chemical users, continue to update safety data sheets when new ones become available, provide training on new label elements, and update hazard communication programs if new hazards are identified. That would be anyone that is using a chemical, providing any information for the end user. You certainly want to provide that training for your employees. Chemical producers review hazard information on all chemicals produced or imported, classify chemicals according to new classification criteria, and update labels and safety data sheets. So that's a lot to do, and OSHA certainly understands that. So as a result, there are some important dates to remember on how all of this gets implemented. Beginning December 1st, 2013, just a few short months from now, employers must train employees on new label elements and safety data sheet format. So essentially all users and users, anybody that is using any chemical must provide that training to their employees by December 1st, 2013. Chemical manufacturers, importers, distributors, and employers must comply with all modified provisions of the standard rule, except distributors may ship products labeled by manufacturers under the old system until December 1st, 2015. And that date coincides, talking about global harmonization, it coincides with the European Union implementation date for classification of mixtures. June 1st, 2016, employers must update alternative workplace labeling and hazard communication program as necessary and provide additional training for newly identified physical or health hazards. For instance, if you transfer a chemical product from its original container, the new container must comply with the new labeling requirements. Now, other agencies were also involved in a lot of these, and we will kind of review some of those as well. In particular, the Department of Transportation, EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission all participated in this global harmonization. Some of the changes that kind of came out even from other agencies include the Department of Transportation. You'll see just the pictograms that have changed and that you will begin seeing on shipping containers going forward for the Department of Transportation. Under the current hazard communication standard, label preparer must provide identity of the chemical and appropriate hazard warnings. This may be done in a variety of ways, and the method to convey this information is left to the preparer. Under a revised HCS, once the hazard classification is complete, the standard specifies what information is to be provided for each hazard class and category. Labels will require the following elements. Pictogram. It's a symbol plus a geographic element such as a border, background, pattern, and color that is intended to convey a specific information about hazards of the chemical. Each pictogram consists of different symbols on a white background with a red square frame set on a point, essentially a red diamond. There are 9 pictograms under the GHS, however, only 8 are required under the hazard communication standard, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about those. Signal words are used to indicate relative level of severity of hazard and alert the reader to potential hazards on the label. Signal word used are danger and warning. Danger obviously would be used for more severe hazard, while warning uses for less severe hazard, similar to creating a danger area for overhead hazards when working around crane. Kind of ties along very well with that. Hazard statement. This is a statement assigned to the hazard class and category that describes the nature of the hazards of the chemical, including, where appropriate, the degree of hazard. An example might be, may cause liver and kidney damage. You'll actually see that written into the statement as well. Precautionary statement is a phrase to describe recommended measures to be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects resulting from exposure to hazardous chemical or improper storage or handling of the hazard. An example of this might be only use non-sparking tools. So you'll see that those will be included on each label. Just a quick look there at the GHS pictograms. We'll take each one and talk a little bit about them and what they are. First one there, exploding bomb. Pretty self-explanatory. Again, they're trying to simplify the information that is presented on the labels to the end user. Exploding bomb obviously would be explosives and items pertaining to that. Flame would be for flammable items. Flame over circle would be your oxidizers. These are agents that may contribute to combustion of other materials. Skull and crossbones. No mixing issues there. It is acute toxicity, fatality. Corrosion, skin corrosion, burns, eye damage, corrosive to metals. Health hazards. Health hazards would be listed with this pictogram and then discussed as well. For instance, a carcinogen would be noted, would be an example of asbestos hazard, which would be known to cause cancer. Exclamation mark. Again, those would be specific as well. Talk about irritants or narcotic effects, respiratory tract irritants, and so forth. And the last one there is the non-mandatory. You still will see it, but it's not mandatory as far as OSHA is concerned, but will certainly be an issue as pertaining to agencies that may be dealing with environmental concerns. So aquatic toxicity you may see listed as well. All right, moving on, just another note before we move through the labeling process. OSHA has retained the flexibility in the revised hazard communication standards. Employers may choose to label workplace containers either with the same label that would be shipped on containers for the chemical under the revised rule, or with label alternatives that meet the requirements for the standard. So sometimes you may have seen utilized or are currently using the NFPA 704 hazard rating for labeling, which would be fine. You can certainly still use that. However, the information supplied on these labels must be consistent with the revised HCS. So you cannot have any conflicting hazard warnings or pictograms. Have to be consistent with what the standard does say and state. Just an example of hazard communication standard labels. This is the format that has been issued out and that they will expect to see on all items as of June 1st, 2015 going forward. And you can kind of see down through there that the items that we talked about, particularly the pictograms and the signal word, is also discussed in that as well. Okay, moving on. Hazard communication safety data sheets. Previously, most of us are familiar with that term, the Material Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS. It's been around for a long time, but that is changing. Communicate hazard, basically what this is to communicate hazards about the chemical products. As of June 1st, 2015, the Hazard Communication Standard will require all new SDSs to be uniform format and include section numbers, the headings, and associated information under the following headings. And we'll break those down and talk about each one. Section 1 will be your identifying section. This is going to give you the product name, the name of the address, phone number of the manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party, and emergency phone numbers. Recommended uses of the chemical, brief description of what it actually does, such as flame retardant or any other restrictions that they feel needs to be put in the identification section. Section 2, hazard identification. This section identifies hazards of the chemical presented on the SDS and the appropriate warning information associated with those hazards. The required information consists of, and you can see down through there, classification, hazard classification of the chemical. Flammable liquid, category 1, would be an item that would be included in that possibly. But again, talking about signal words, hazard statements, pictograms, all the stuff that you would essentially see on a label would be included in this section on the SDS. Section 3, composition and information of or on ingredients. This section identifies the ingredients contained in the product. require information consists of substances, essentially the chemical name or other common names associated with that particular chemical. Mixtures, these are concentrations of what's in it. What are the ingredients? How much of certain things are in this particular mixture of an agent? Also, continuing on with that, there may be some exceptions to describing specifically about those, and there could be issues related to a trade secret. It could be a batch type variation where they're mixing a large batch and they can't actually detail specifically what percentage of certain items are in there. The SDS is used for a group of substantially similar mixtures. So any one of those possibly could be an exception to that mixtures and percentage rule. Okay. Section 4 talks about first aid measures. What do we do in case of? All right, so this will tell you exactly what an untrained professional or untrained person would be willing to do or could do to help with any issues pertaining to exposure for this agent. Descriptions will include symptoms and effects, and any symptoms that may be acute or delayed. And of course, any recommendations for immediate care and special treatment when necessary. Section 5, firefighting measures. Section provides recommendations for fighting a fire caused by this chemical, such as stating the use of a Class D fire extinguisher for combustible metals such as magnesium. So in those areas you will certainly see firefighting requirements in Section 5. Section 6 talks about accidental release, speaks of appropriate response to spills, leaks, or releases, including containment and cleanup practice to prevent or minimize exposure to people, property, or the environment. Very important to certainly understand what those would be. Section 7, handling and storage, provides guidance on safe handling practice and condition for safe storage of chemicals. The requirement consists of precautions for safe handling, including recommendations for handling incompatible chemicals, minimizing the release of chemicals into the environment, and providing advice on general hygiene practices. Recommendations on the conditions for safe storage, including incompatibilities, such as storing oxygen and acetylene tanks when not being used, such as in a welding operation. So what would you do in those handling and storage issues pertaining to certain elements? Section 8, exposure control and personal protection. What do you need to know about your exposure to this particular element, and how are you going to protect yourself? All right, talks about exposure limits, engineering controls, personal protective measures that can be utilized to minimize worker exposure. Things like engineering controls would be the utilization of local exhaust ventilation. So adding a fan into an area where this product may be applied to allow fresh air to be brought into the environment area to minimize exposure to this particular agent. Recommendations for protective measures to prevent illness or injuries. Such things as you're talking about eyes, skin, face, respiratory protection. So in these areas you would be possibly talking about the use of respirators and the need for particular gloves, whether they be non-pervious gloves or something of that nature, would be certainly identified in Section 8. Section 9, physical and chemical properties. This is going to give you an idea about what this particular product looks like, smells like, things to kind of be aware of. So it will give you an idea about its appearance, odor, and in addition to all the other items that you see listed on there as well. The pH, the relative density, melting point, solubility, flash point, evaporation rate, upper and lower flammable and explosive limits, viscosity, even an auto ignition temperature essentially at what ambient air temperature could this chemical ignite by itself. And again, not everything that's listed on there is going to be discussed for that particular item. It's just based on what those particular physical and chemical properties may be for this agent that's listed under this SDS. Section 10 speaks of stability and reactivity. So reactivity, how is this product going to react with other items? What do we need to be aware of and concerned with? Chemical stability, how stable is the product? Tells you whether or not you need to be concerned if it is in normal conditions. Does this product need to be at a certain temperature? Anything that would cause the stability or some issue pertaining to that chemical would be discussed in that section. And any other item that needs to be talked about with the particular item would be discussed under the other section, something as static discharge. So storing this item in a metal container, you may have to bond the metal container or ground it to make sure that there's not a static buildup as a result of storing this item. Okay, list of all chemicals or classes of incompatible material. So that would also be included in there along with other items as well. Anything pertaining to storage and use of. Okay. Section 11, toxicological information. This is going to give you information on likely routes of exposure. If this is inhaled, ingested, or you get it on your skin or in an eye, what are the items pertaining to each one of those routes of entry. So you certainly want to know what that is. It will give you information on immediate or chronic effects, so your short or long-term exposure. Basically, how much exposure to this chemical will cause you harm is what this section will talk about. Section 12, it's non-mandatory, and then actually the next 4 sections that we'll be discussing are considered non-mandatory under the OSHA Hazard Communication Rule, the revised OSHA Hazard Communication Rule. And the reason for that is that these items are regulated by other agencies. It's not that they are not included on the SDS, they are, but they are on there for other agencies' purposes. So under this ecological information section, provides information to evaluate environmental impact on chemicals if they were released into the environment. So certainly you want to be aware of that. Okay, again, another non-mandatory section talking about disposal consideration. Provides guidance on proper disposal practice, recycling, or reclamation of the chemical or its container. Safe handling practices as well. Describes the appropriate disposal containers to use, recommendations on appropriate disposal methods, description of physical and chemical properties that may affect disposal activities, and any other issue that may be pertinent to disposal considerations. Section 14 talks of transport information. Again, guidance on classification information for shipping and transporting of hazardous chemicals by road, air, rail, or sea. We talked and saw the items earlier from the Department of Transportation, their pictograms that have changed. We saw that a little bit early on. So you can kind of see how the other agencies also were affected and had an effect on this change to the hazard communication standards. Section 15 talks about regulatory information. And this section identifies health and safety, environmental regulations specific for the product that is not included anywhere else on the SDS. So if there's something specific for this particular item that's not covered in any of the other sections, this is where this information will be provided on that SDS. All right, last section, section 16, would be other information. This will give you information as to when the SDS was actually prepared or its last known revision. It may also state where the changes have been made to the previous version. So when a product comes out and it's new and improved, well, this is a section on what will be indicated in there. Typically will tell you what this new and improved item or substance or mixture for the product, where that change has occurred. Okay. And finally, just kind of reviewing a little bit employer responsibility. Employers must ensure that SDSs are readily available to employees for all hazard chemicals in their workplace. This may be done in many ways. For example, employers may keep the SDSs in a binder or a computer as long as the employees have access or immediate access to the information without leaving their work area when needed, and backup is available for rapid access to the SDS in case of power outage or other emergency. In case someone has to go to the emergency room as a result of getting some product in their eye, you need to have the SDS available so that that can be provided to the medical care professional to know how to treat the individual's exposure. Furthermore, employers may want to designate a person or persons responsible for obtaining and maintaining the SDSs. The employer does not have an SDS, the employer or designated person should contact the manufacturer to obtain one. And in some situations where a company may be viewed as both possibly the user and distributor, such as an equipment rental company, it would be valuable to provide the SDSs for chemical agents used in the rental equipment for the end user, so that they have that available for them when the product or when the item is actually being utilized in the field. Okay. In summary, again, what you need to know as a user: hazard classification provides specific criteria for classification of health and physical hazards, as well as classification of mixtures. Labels, been a big change with the labels. We talked a lot about those, but chemical manufacturers and importers will be required to provide a label that includes a harmonized signal word, which we talked about what those were, the warning words. Pictogram, talked about each one of those. Again, there are 9 pictograms that we discussed and talked about. The hazard statement for each hazard class and category. Precautionary statements used must also be provided. Safety data sheets, again, the change there. We now have a specified 16-section format. Under the old material safety data sheets with the previous hazard communication standard, there were items that were to be provided, but there was no strict format discussed in there. So that with the new revision, it does talk about each section and what each section must have in them. And the big one there, information and training. Again, employers are required to train all workers by December 1st, 2013 on a new label elements and safety data sheet format to facilitate recognition and understanding. Again, the changes with the new revised hazard communication standard talks to the right not just to be aware of, but to actually know and know what your hazards are. All right, again, thank you for your time today. Feel free to contact us for additional information at Construction Safety Experts, Inc. Our telephone number is 919-417-2139, or you can also contact us on the web at www.safety-experts.com. Thank you for your time today.